Well, I want to tell you just a little bit about myself. I have been experiencing a passion for many years to pursue health. And everybody wants to be healthy, don't they? You want a healthy family, you want to eat healthy, you want to live healthy, you want to be happy, you want to be pain-free. That's a big issue. I want to be pain-free. Don't let me be miserable when I sit down, stand up, or lay down, or anything that I do. I just don't want to experience any discomfort. And that's the way we are as humans. I personally have experienced a great deal of discomfort in my life. And I think God allowed me the opportunity of enjoying some misery, if you could put it that way, on a number of occasions. Some of these occasions, I think, were simply because God had to allow me to reap the consequences of my own actions. If you live a very unhealthy lifestyle, your body eventually begins to come to the point where it goes into rebellion and you begin to break it down. It cannot continue to function indefinitely under a system of abuse. And so little by little, I learned to understand that I was suffering from the consequences of my own ridiculous actions. I thought that I could abuse the system indefinitely because I was somehow special. When I was in school, I tended to be the young guy who didn't get caught breaking the rules. I would maybe do them, but I never really tended to get caught. I had the fame of being the only person that ever went to my school while I was there that didn't get a spanking. That was back in the days when children got such things. But I always managed to either be a good boy or pretend to be a good boy, and I didn't get caught at things. And so I kind of going through life, I thought that somehow I was special. Got up into my college years, and if we had a project where we had a situation where we had in economics class, we had a microeconomy where we had a society where we had manufacturing people and raw material people and we had marketing people. Somehow or other, my friends and I, we would actually come to the end, and we would always win the game by tweaking the rules slightly. And the professor would be particularly annoyed with us, but yet he was impressed with us because we were like modern-day entrepreneurs. We tweaked the rules and we won, kind of like the Donald Trumps and people like that of the world today. They almost write the rules because of the power that they have. But I just couldn't do that indefinitely with my own health and my own well-being. And I began to suffer a lot. And as some of you know, I began to suffer from multiple sclerosis. It was very, very invasive to my life. It ruined my life as I knew it because I could no longer work. I could not function. I could not feed my family. I could not take care of my children. I was depressed. I sat in a chair and looked at a wall. And if I wanted to go someplace, I sometimes would rely on my wife to pick me up and move me there. It wasn't a whole lot of fun. And it went on for many years, and through some incredible things, God was able to show me how to get rid of the causes and to repair the damage so that I can do a lot of things that a lot of people my age don't do. And I'm very grateful for that. Part of that passion that came out of that gratitude, I wanted to share that with other people. So I began to share a lot of the things that I had come to understand with people in my own neighborhood, people in my own state, people in my own country. But little by little, I just had this passion. I wanted to get out and share it with the whole world. And I began to plead with the Lord to just give me some opportunities to get out of this box I'm in, this comfortable place I'm in. And he said, well, certainly, I'll take you to some places. So he began to take me into places that I'd never been before. And soon I found myself in little small islands out in the middle of the ocean somewhere. I found myself in jungles. I found myself in mountains, places in South America that I did not dream that I would ever go, trying to find a way to bring health and healing and salvation to people who needed it so desperately. And a number of years of this had gone by, and so we would involve ourselves with our ministry. I developed a ministry called Healing Leaves Ministry, and we just wanted to give some of the good things that God gave to us to other people. And we began to arrange for a group of individuals. We'd go to a foreign country where people were living in a deprived condition. And we want to take some medical care, some health education, and of course the good news of the everlasting gospel to these people. And it was pretty exciting. And so one time we had this opportunity to take a large group into South America, into the country of Peru. And we were working in conjunction with a number of different non-governmental organizations. The Red Cross was there, and the Peruvian government had their health ministry involved with it. Our Healing Leaves ministry and a couple others were all working together in this project. And so the government would send a bus to our hotel every morning. We'd all climb on. They load up a cook for us who went along with us to whatever town or city or village we were going to. And as soon as we got there, the cook would jump off the bus and look around and ask the mayor or somebody where was the nicest, cleanest kitchen in town. And that's where she would set up and cook for the team that day. And she was cooking for us and preparing food for us while we were out working with the people. Well, it was very fun because, the governor would come of the province and the mayor of the city would come. And they had pre-selected people who were special needs cases, who could not afford care, who needed care. And they would bring them all to some government building there, a school or mayor's office or some city hall or whatever, and we'd then meet with these people. And prior to that, I had been in a lot of jungle situations, and we're trying to explain to each person that comes through our little makeshift clinic, okay, you have very high blood sugar. That means you need to cut down on the amount of sugar you're consuming. It means that you need to get some more exercise. It means you need to cut down on how much fat you're intaking into your body. You need to eat this kind of diet, whatever. I'm like, whoa, we're spending so much time talking and so little time taking care of people. I said, we're going to do batch processing like you do in a computer. So, showed up to this next project, and I told the people, before we get started, I know there's hundreds of you here, you all want to see these people, you all want to be cared for, but before you do, I'm going to spend 1 hour of your precious time teaching you how to stay well. And I said, I'm going to ask you at the end if you think it was worth your hour. And I did, and the people sometimes, and even in these little primitive places, they'd give us a standing ovation. They were so happy because we just shared simple things with them to help prevent the necessity of medical care in the future. And I'm going to share that with you, and I know you're not a third world group of people. You're people that probably are widely read. You're going to know a lot of this material, but there may be some parts and pieces here that you may not know. There may be a little bit of balance that you'll gain because you're seeing a larger picture. But health is important, and there's actually a really nice formula for health that we all have, and sometimes we think it's rather complicated. And so we struggle trying to find out what is the secret of health. Isn't she precious? I saw that and I couldn't resist. I had to buy that image. Health, however, it didn't take Einstein to figure it out. Health took God to figure it out because God was the one that created the human body. He is the creator of our body. He is the one who knows exactly what needs to go in and what needs to come out and what needs to happen on the way through. And so if you want to discover perfect health, I really think you need to go to the blueprint and find out what was written about this machine that we're trying to live in today. And that blueprint, I believe, is God's Word. Now, yes, there are a wonderful amount of scientific journals that we can go to today, that we can read information from, good, positive information. But you know what I found about the majority of the science that I've been reading for the last several years? It only affirms what I already found in the Bible. God didn't necessarily tell me in details. He just told me, do this, and this is the result you will get. Science today is now telling me why I'm getting the result that God told me I would get. So to me, it takes even less faith to follow God today after we've got the science than it did before, which to me means I don't have even as much excuse as I had before. 1 Corinthians 6:19 teaches us to value what we have. Our body is the temple of the Holy Ghost. I believe that I need to treat God's dwelling place here on earth, which is me, with respect. To destroy this means that I have no respect for myself and I have no respect for the one who made it and gave it to me. because it does not even belong to me. So that's an important passage for us to start with. Also, 1 Corinthians 3:16, know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? Friends, can you imagine God's Spirit dwelling in us? That's really, really almost too big to get inside of my little mind. And I know sometimes my wife used to hang a sign on the door. She said, if you came to see me, come on in. If you came to see the house, stay out. You know, that's what a busy lady puts on the door. She's extremely busy, and, you know, she's trying to do as many things as she possibly can do, and more than she possibly can do sometimes. But, you know, there are times when the house gets to a point where I really wouldn't want anybody to see it. You know, we've all been there. You know, company's at the door and like, oh man, we wish we could push pause, you know, and we can run around and fix all this. But do we want God to come in and be the guest in a mess like that? No, we want it to be the very best it can. And so I think that we need to continually look at the fact that we are not our own. One of the very first things that we as humans need if we want to stay healthy is physical activity. Our grandparents got a lot of physical activity, but then, you know, they were born right after, you know, the real thrust of the Industrial Revolution. Transportation began to be much more easy. You know, farming. You know, my mom and dad have told me stories about how the teams of horses kind of just got left out to pasture because the tractor could till up so much more soil than the horses, and pretty soon, you know, well, we'll pull 3 bottoms instead of 1 bottom behind the plow and things of that nature. And suddenly we're using labor-saving devices, and we're using our cars. You know, I remember when I was a child, one vehicle was pretty much what everybody in the neighborhood had. Now, how many one-car families do we know? Very few. How many cars? It's amazing. You know, I went to a church last weekend, and I thought, wow, is there going to be a bunch of people here? I might be afraid to preach in this church. I got in, there's not very many people. I think everybody brought at least 3 vehicles in the parking lot. We don't like physical activity for some reason. We just have gotten so immune to it. However, physical activity is what moves your circulation. The Bible says that the life of the body is in the blood, and the blood has to move, and it's not going to move without physical activity. You have to have cardiovascular exercise to move your blood. Your immune system will not work without physical activity at its optimum. You know, I remember when I was a child, and I'm from the United States, we began to get the interstate highway system going across and crisscross and this way and that way across. And my father told me that it was because the government said, okay, we've just gotten done with World War II, and we recognized at that point that it's really hard to move stuff from one coast to the other in a big time, and what if we got attacked on both coasts or whatever at the same time? And we were all afraid, and so we got this transportation system in so we could move stuff rapidly around so that our resources, our tanks, our guns, and, you know, everything could move from point A to point B very rapidly. If your immune system is going to fight an infection, it's got to be able to enable all of those cells and get them out of the bone marrow, get them into the bloodstream, get them through the various processes that it takes to refine them down and program them into being the kinds of cells it needs to fight that particular type of infection. So the body is always having to make these things, and it can't happen if it's not moving. And that movement then also is so good because it takes and moves around the fluids. What would you rather pump if you were the heart? Water or Jell-O? So many of us today are running around with Jell-O type blood. I remember I had the opportunity one time. I was at a trade exhibition for medical people, and there was a guy sitting there, and he had one of these live blood analysis microscopes there and a big screen up, and he said, here, come here, let me poke your blood. And he poked my finger and he got my blood and he put it on there, and I'm looking at my cells and they looked like raisins, and I'm like, I'm dehydrated. And I began to think about that, and for years after that, and I still do, I drink more water than I ever drank before that time, simply because if my cells are going to do what they're going to do, they need to be plumped out, not all shriveled up. And many of the functions of detoxification and taking in of the nutrients and things like that are going to go through the cell membranes, and if the cell membranes are all wrinkled up, the transportation is going to go down. It's going to slow the rate down. Your metabolic processes, everything's going to slow down. You need water for everything to move, and cleaning the body is requiring pure water. You need about 6 to 10 glasses a day, depending on how much you weigh. There's some formulas that are out there. You can probably do some of that mathematics on yourself, but we just kind of recommend, if you're an average build person and you've got 2 functioning kidneys, probably 8 glasses of water a day are probably going to be good for you. If it's hot and steamy and sweaty, does it get like that around here? Ever? No, not like where I've been, and I just got back from the Dominican Republic. It was hot down there. The sun can come out there, and it can make you really, really squirm and run for shade in a very short amount of time. And I remember the first few times I went there, I would sweat so profusely, like I would almost change the color of my clothing from the detoxification for the first couple of days. Cannot purify your body without pure water. And I just tell people, you don't want to be drinking a whole bunch of other things other than pure water. That's your best cleaning solvent you can put into the human body for cleaning it. We've got choices. You go to a market, you definitely have choices. Your water's your best. Fruit juices are good. Vegetable juices, they're awesome. I mean, they've got nutrition in them. Sometimes we actually do juice therapy because we want to add a whole bunch of extra nutrition. But when it comes down to just hydrating your cells, nothing beats pure water. Your soft drinks, obviously, are bad news. Stay away from things like coffee and tea and colas, things with caffeine, because they are definitely going to be detrimental to the cellular function of the human body. Water is what God gave Adam and Eve in the garden. He did not put an espresso under any tree. You don't drink enough water, you're going to be having more kidney stones than the average person, probably more infections, double work for the liver and the kidneys. These are a process of elimination. The less water you drink, the harder they will have to work, and the less efficient they are in detoxifying your body. And eventually, if you don't take care of that, your body gets dirty enough inside that you begin to suffer from some sort of a chronic degenerative disease. One of the great things about that exercise is that it makes your lungs work, and you can take in more wonderful, cool, clean, fresh air. You guys have plenty of it up here in the Pacific Northwest. There's lots of good fresh air, and you're very fortunate to have it. The only problem is we tend to hide from it staying indoors. It's better to open windows. It's better to get outside and move that body. The more you deeply breathe, the more fresh air you're going to move. What we've noticed in studying people is people tend to breathe. Your lungs go down to about here, and we tend to breathe off of here. We need to breathe all down to the rest of this, because if we don't, we're losing about maybe perhaps 30% of the possibility of that gas exchange of getting more oxygen inside of our bodies and get it into our bloodstream. And our cells are craving that oxygen. And the majority of the pathogens that get inside of you hate that oxygen. And you can stay healthier longer with it. Sunshine is awesome. I bet you'd love to see some sunshine about now, wouldn't you? I try to do as much of my foreign travel to warm tropical places in the winter as I possibly can, because living in the Pacific Northwest, we have a little deficit with sunlight sometimes. But I love the sun, because the sun is one of those things that comes down on our bodies. It gets rid of the germs that are on the outside of us. It affects our pituitary and makes us happy, helps us to make more of our happy hormones. We can make more serotonin, more melatonin. We can actually function a little bit better. We can make more of the pain-relieving hormones that we would if we didn't. People who do not get enough sun are the ones who tend to be more likely to succumb to seasonal affective disorder, clinical depression. People don't sleep as well. The more sun exposure that you get in moderate amounts many times will help to bring your blood pressure back down into a homeostasis again. help you sleep better. So hiding from the sun is not necessarily that good of an idea. I like to get in the sun. Now, I know we're all afraid of the sun because we don't want skin cancer. Is that correct? Oh, those horrible UV rays and UVB and UVA, they're going to turn us all into prunes. We're all going to get wrinkles and we're all going to die from skin cancer. Good things are good in moderation. Bad things we shouldn't have at all. But good things come good in moderation. I like good things, and the sun is one of those good things. I'm not so afraid of skin cancer after I read some studies that were done at some American universities on subjects with skin cancer. They took those people who had had skin cancers and they broke that big group down into two groups. One group continued to eat the SAD, or the standard American diet, with all of the high fat, the 39 to 40 grams of fat per day. The other group, they cut it in half, which is still too high, but they cut it in half, and that group had like about 60% reoccurrences of skin cancer than the high fat group did. I don't consume a lot of fat. I don't eat hardly any food colorings. Pretty much all of my nutrition comes from plants, and I really don't worry about the sun all that much. In fact, there are studies out now recently, I saw they've been on the internet recently, showing that the more of the colorful plants that you eat, the less sunscreen you need. So, God gave us things very thoughtfully. Sleep is important, guys. What time do you go to bed at night? Anybody get to bed 11 o'clock? Later? Earlier? Where are you? Earlier? Okay, that's good. I usually do this in Latin American countries, and I have to go all the way up till midnight or 1 o'clock with a lot of these people. Since electricity came in, they just like to stay up and enjoy that electricity as much as possible. And what we have discovered is people need to be asleep about 9 o'clock every evening if they want to retard the aging process. What happens is we have to go through REM cycles in order to produce the repair and restoration hormones for our body. While it's sleeping at night, it's detoxifying itself, and doesn't really happen very well if your body is digesting a big, huge, heavy meal. Slows that detoxification process down, and if you're not detoxifying, you can't do all of the repair and housekeeping that you normally want to do. And it takes about an hour and a half per cycle, and they kind of just quit about midnight, about when Cinderella turned in, the coach turned into a pumpkin. Do the math. When do we need to be asleep? About 9 o'clock. Tonight we're not going to quite make it, but we'll go to bed, an extra half hour early tomorrow night, hopefully, and we'll make up for it. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work that way, but sleep is so important, not just for aging, not just for good health, but also to keep your immune system where it needs to be. You all know what happens when you don't sleep. Can you go without sleep and go without sleep and go without sleep and then run out with all of the epidemics of flu and whatever and miss it all? You know it's going to drain you down. Our diet is very important. God gave us some good things to eat, and I always recommend to people, eat your diet as colorful as you can make it and natural as you can make it. You notice what's in that basket? Is there any fat in there? Not a whole lot, is there? Any preservatives in there? Not a lot. What I see in there are fruits and vegetables and things. Those things contain all kinds of plant nutrients or phytonutrients. Those chemicals have been put in there to protect us. You look at your beets and your carrots, they've got carotenoids. They will coat your arteries to prevent the plaque from sticking. You've got ellagic acid in the grapes. You've got it in the raspberries. Those things are anti-cancer, anti-carcinogenic. You've got, that's either leeks or onions over there. There's probably some organic sulfur compounds in there that are going to help to activate your phase 2 enzymes, which are going to take out the carcinogenic compounds and get them out of your body before they can attach to any of your cells and begin to wear them down and create some, cell proliferation that shouldn't be there. There's even some good cayenne peppers there. They'll kill the Helicobacter pylori so you don't get any ulcers. There's some, was that a cucumber in there? Yeah, it's a good cucumber. You know, that's full of silica, that it'll keep your veins and capillaries strong. I mean, I go, the apples, wow. Apple a day keeps the doctor away. I remember when my son was a little tiny boy, my wife cut up little apple pieces and she set it on his high tray there. And she said, eat it. And he said, no, I don't want to eat it. And she said, no, but it's good for you. Well, I don't think it's good for me. I don't want to eat it. He was being a little bit stubborn. She said, well, come on, eat it. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. And he looked at her and he said, Mom, what doctor? He'd never seen a doctor. He'd never been to one. He had no clue because he'd been cared for very well. That's all part of God's plan. God said in Genesis 1:29, behold, I've given you every herb bearing the seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree and the fruit, which the tree yielding the seed to you, it shall be your meat. That's what God gave us to eat. That's what he gave to Adam and Eve, fruits, grains, and nuts. It wasn't until sin came along that we got vegetables. I know some of us would have just really have preferred not to have that part of the menu, right? You'd be just fine if with the fruits and the grains and the nuts, not have to deal with the veggies. I've had to learn to love vegetables, and I do now, but as a child, and I still sometimes catch myself, I'll gravitate towards fruit, and I'll stay away from the vegetables. But we need the vegetables, and after sin came in, we had stress because we had guilt, and so the human body now had all this negative forces working against it within it, and then God says, okay, we've got to add some things to take care of you. We're going to give you a whole new set of chemistry to protect your cells now that you've got disease coming your way and stress and strain and guilt and all those things coming upon your system. He said, I'm going to give you the thorns and the thistles to make you have to work a little harder out in your garden, and you're going to sweat a little more, and that's good for you because it helped detoxify you, and now you're going to have to eat the vegetables to get the extra phytonutrients to stay well because you were naughty. And so he gave us this dietary program. We see the fruits and the grains and the nuts and the vegetables, the seeds, the legumes. This is the diet that is simple, but it is 100% complete, full of all of the nutrients that the human body should need. There is sufficient fat, there is sufficient protein. You know, many people look at this dietary program and they say, well, where would I get my protein? There's no beefsteak there. There's no drumsticks. I've got to have protein. I heard the dietitian say that we only get complete proteins out of animal products. Scientists tell us today that as long as we're eating a source from a grain and a legume within 8 hours of each other, they combine the amino acids in the bloodstream. They make that complete protein within our own human body, and we never suffer from any kind of a protein deficiency. Protein deficiencies are such a myth amongst people. We have now begun to move beyond the wisdom of our fathers. You know, I remember as a younger person, it was always because I had chosen to be a vegetarian, people kept saying, but you can't get enough protein, you can't get enough protein, you'll never survive. And I remember I was working in college and I was a carpet layer and I was kind of a slender kid, but I could carry a 300-pound roll on my shoulders and walk into some lady's house with that. And I walked into this lady's house and she looked at me and she said, oh yeah, you're one of those people that eats nothing but fruits and grains and vegetables and things. How do you get enough protein? You're going to get so weak you're going to never be able to do anything. You know, you're just going to wither up and die. And I said, well, I'd like to talk to you about it, but can I get this 300 pounds off my shoulder first? And I put it down on her living room floor, and I asked her where her husband was. She said, oh, he's in the bedroom in the other room on his dialysis machine. But this is the kind of diet that the majority of people would be their first choice, their default. This is what the standard American diet really focuses on. This is what the meat and potatoes people go to first. This is the kind of diet that was very prevalent in my family when I was first growing up. And there's a whole sad history that comes along with that I don't have time tonight. But this is what people crave. You see that? It no longer makes me hungry, but I know that there's a lot of people in the world today would look at that and they're going to have little things going on in their tongue, under their tongue, in the back of their jaw. They're salivating because that just looks really savory and really good, and it's gooey and cheesy and fatty and But that's not the dietary program that God gave us, and if you want to live on that, you will live with the consequences. You know, statistics are statistics, and sometimes it varies, and it depends on whose statistics that you actually decide to choose to believe. I have kind of taken and looked at quite a number of different studies and things, kind of averaged them all out, and it really appears to me that being a vegetarian today, 2012, more than likely can add, if you do this throughout your lifetime, can add up to about 12 years of life expectancy. And I've had people say, well, I don't care to live that long, but you know what? I do. I actually enjoy my life. I'm not miserable. You know, my mother is, next 2 weeks from now, will be 95 years of age. And she's beginning to think she's not all that happy with the quality she has. But if I look at where she is, she just stopped working about 30 hours a week at age 86. You know, incredible amount of energy and ambition, because early on in her life she decided she would eat differently than the rest of her family did. And you know, she was one of the younger kids, and she's the one who's probably outlived almost all the rest of them in her family. It's a good way to do it. You know, back in Adam's day and Methuselah's day, we saw people living almost 1,000 years. Noah made it 950 years, which is, I don't know how you'd keep track of all your memories that way. You think of how many scrapbooks you'd have? I was reading about a very special and unique man. I'm not 100% certain I can tell you with total certainty that this is a completely true story, but there was a man in China who I've been reading a lot of accounts about. He died at what they account to be 236 years of age in 1933. And I'm kind of intrigued with his life and what he ate and what he didn't eat and what he, you know, how he slept. I'm trying to figure out what we can, but there's not a whole lot of history about him, other than we know he had about 86 children and he outlived 23 wives. Guy had some vitality, you know? Noah, imagine the vitality to live 950 years. And then we'd look at Abraham, and we've got 175 years. Something happened at the time of the flood, and that is all of the fruits and grains and nuts and veggies all got washed away, didn't they? And so what did they have on board the big boat? The animals. And so when they came off the boat, you know, it takes a while for apple trees to grow. It takes a while to get all these crops going again. And so, yeah, Noah and his family, they got out all of their good non-GMO heirloom seeds, and they were able to get their gardens going, but it took a while, and took a while for the grains and the fields and the orchards and things to really take in. And so they began to eat some of the spare animals that God instructed them to put on board. And they kind of liked that. They got used to barbecue. And, you know, the chicken fried steak tasted pretty good, and they stayed with it. And so generation after generation, and within 8 generations, we've lost almost 800 years of life expectancy from one dietary change. I think it's significant, and I pay attention to significant things like this. Cancer is something that will get our attention, won't it? In the United States, we're talking almost 12 million people having cancer. You know, that's a big piece of the population. The cancer industry is huge. Cancer business is huge. And 2/3 of them will die. You know, that really gets my attention. It makes me stop, and it makes me think. I am a cancer survivor. I developed cancer when I was almost just a little past being a toddler. I was about 4.5 to 5 years of age, somewhere along that line. And I still have the memories of the battle with that cancer and how miserable it was. I remember the living on the pain pills. I remember watching the clock. I can have a pill every 4 hours. And I learned how to tell time by when my next pill could be obtained. And, I'm a little 5-year-old drug addict. I couldn't make it, to the fourth. By the time the 4-hour thing came up, I was screaming. I'm pleading with my mother, give me a pill. And she's trying to rock me, and she's trying to distract me. I'll tell you what, there's no distracting that kind of pain. I had a tumor in my head that was pushing my left eye right out of the socket, and it was excruciating, just the most incredible pain. And you cannot distract a 5-year-old with that kind of pain by rocking him or singing to him or playing games with him. I wanted my medicine. And it was not something that I enjoyed. I am very thankful that God saw fit to heal me. My mother began to plead with the Lord, and she said, it's not fair that this child has cancer. There's all kinds of people out there who've done all kinds of wicked and evil things. I think it would be more just and more humane than one of these bad guys out there who's out robbing banks or murdering or raping or stealing or whatever. Let one of those guys have the cancer, but not this poor little kid. He's done nothing. And she fought with the Lord about that for a long, long time. And then one night, she went to sleep. Well, she tried to go to sleep, and she couldn't go to sleep because it was crunch time. She'd taken me to the surgeons, and they'd finally diagnosed what the issue was. They wanted to do surgery. She asked the surgeon, she said, have you done this before? No. Has anyone done this kind of a surgery before? Not that I know of. So what's the prognosis? Well, we don't really know. Is it a good prognosis? I told you, I don't really know. Well, what are the chances? We don't really know. You imagine being a mother? Trying to deal with that. It was just ripping her heart out. And so she began to think, and she said, sir, if it were your little boy, what would you do? And the guy said, I don't know. And she said, well, I don't know either, so I'm going to take him back home again, and I'm just going to give myself 2 weeks here, and then I'll come back if I can't find anything else, and you don't know anything else. We'll touch bases in 2 weeks. And so they took me back home on the train, 400 miles on the train. I loved the train, and my mom got me a little screwdriver set at the bank. They give away things, for opening an account or whatever. So on the way, they gave us one of these multi-tools with all the screwdrivers, bits, and whatever. I'm 5 years old, but I was working on getting the windows taken out of that room we were in. I was having a good time with it till Mom figured out what I was doing. Kind of ruined my distraction. But she took me home, and my father was a beekeeper, and he had this big order for his honey, and so they worked as hard as they could to get all this honey bottled up and in the bottles and into the boxes and off to one of these large companies that would buy the honey from them, and it took them about 10 days to get this order. In the meantime, my mom was praying and arguing with the Lord every night, and now the last night, she's on her knees all night long, and about 5 o'clock in the morning, she comes to the point where she just can't fight with God anymore. And she said, God, I've argued and argued and argued, and I finally have come to the realization that he is your child. He was yours before I got him, and so I'm going to give him back. I cannot fix him. I cannot find any help for him. You're bigger than me. It's all yours. About 5 o'clock in the morning, she fell asleep. About 7 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, jumped out of bed, looked in the mirror. I can see with both eyes, and both of them are where they ought to be. There was just a little bit of a raising there that was gone within a day or so. And my parents took me back on the train, all 400 miles back down to Chicago again, took me to the hospital, took me to the surgeon, and he proceeded to get quite indignant with my mother for bringing my twin sibling, which I did not have. And finally he said, okay, I don't understand it, but take him home and be very grateful. And she did. But cancer is serious. It's becoming an epidemic. You look in history, you go way back in history, we really didn't have a whole lot of it. But the fact is, we as human beings are getting weaker and weaker, aren't we? Each generation. You talk to people in healthcare, and it's like every generation brings a whole new category, whole new set of challenges. You know, you look at, you do, if you're in healthcare and you deal with the parents, and then along comes the next generation, and it's like, wow, this is even more complex and even more challenging than the generation before. There's some of you old enough to remember cassette tapes. Somebody posted something on Facebook that I thought was incredibly cute the other night. There were 2 items laying on a little table. One was a cassette tape, and one was a number 2 lead pencil with an eraser on it. And it said under there, "I'll bet none of our kids would ever guess the connection." You know the connection? You stick the pencil in it, and you tighten up the slack, and you rewind it. Kids would never know it. But something else about cassette tapes, you know, somebody heard a good song and they recorded it, or they heard a good sermon, or they recorded it, or they heard something, that they was a story or whatever. They wanted to share it with people, so they put it on tape. And it was good, so they let you listen to it, and you're like, well, wow, I'm going to copy that. So you copy it. Now you got to copy it on your little plastic case with a little tape inside, and you think it's pretty cool, so you give it to your neighbor, and they make a copy of it. And every generation, what happens? Does the sound get better? The sound gets worse. Genetically, that's what's happening to the human race. From the time that God created Adam and Eve and put them in that garden and made them absolutely flawless and perfect and to live immortally forever and ever, and then sin comes along and begins to degrade the DNA and our very first parents, and they begin to hand that DNA down from generation after generation, and it's been like a cassette tape being copied and copied and recopied, and we are not as strong as we were generations ago. Consequently, we have more pronation than generations before us. Therefore, I think it pays us to be extra careful with how we treat the human mechanism than even those generations before us, more than our parents and our grandparents. You know, there are so many of those good things that we just talked about that we should eat. There are some things we probably ought to start taking a second look at. How many protective plant chemicals can we get out of this secondhand food here? What is there that is going to create health in the human body out of a big chunk of red meat? You see the news this week, what it said about eating red meat? Said it's risky. You have a 13% more chance of dying from any cause if you're eating meat once a day. That was the news report that was out. I've seen research reports saying that somebody who eats meat on a routine basis probably has as high as a 300% higher chance of mortality than people who are living on a 100% plant-based diet. Kind of depends on what type of cancer. This particular article was really looking at death from any sort, but if you're focusing on cancer, you don't have any fiber, you don't have anything that protects against heart disease, you've got extra protein. I'll tell you, cancer cells love extra protein. They also love all of the toxins that this poor creature was carrying around in it. The more toxic your system is, the more prone you are to succumbing to cancer. People who have a more clean, more alkaline-based blood supply are going to be less likely to develop it. But yet when you eat a heavy, high-protein diet full of toxins, your blood is going to be more likely to be more acid-based. It will carry less oxygen, and you will be more prone to succumbing to cancer than you would before. And some other risky things, anything with a whole bunch of fat in it, things that are high protein and have a lot of fat combined with them, and have a lot of cholesterol combined with those are the things that are going to be less likely to provide health than those things that we saw earlier that God put on our original dietary program. When we were in Peru, they brought this gentleman to us, hoping that we could do something for him. He had a carcinoma on the top of his head that was unbelievable. The blue tinge or the purple tinge came from them putting iodine on it to just keep the flies off of it. They said the flies were driving him crazy walking around on his head. You know, it broke my heart. I wanted so bad to help him, but there was absolutely nothing that could be done for him other than to counsel him on, you'll be better off you stop drinking the alcohol that you're drinking. You're better off you stop smoking. You're better off to eat, fruits and grains and nuts and vegetables and all this, stuff that you're currently eating. You need to get some sleep. All I knew to do at that point was try to find a way to prolong his life. But yet on the other hand, the misery that he was suffering, I wasn't sure. I just, it just absolutely broke my heart. We are so blessed to be born where we are, to be raised where we are, to have the choices that we have. When I travel in some of these places and see what these poor people are suffering with, no idea what the cause of diseases are. If you do get a disease, it's going to run its natural course in your body. You don't have an opportunity to feel any other way than you do. You maybe go to a witch doctor or a shaman. If you're lucky, you might get to some little outpost clinic and somebody will give you a little bit of a treatment of first aid of some sort, or not. It's really intensely heartbreaking. And for that reason, I've made up my mind, I cannot cure the ills of this world. If I could actually go out and I could somehow miraculously create some sort of a way that I could heal every sick person in the world tonight, it'd be a great thing, wouldn't it? But within a week, what would be happening all around the world? People would be getting sick again. And so it really occurred to me one day, I would do more for the world if I could learn to prevent diseases than treat them. If I could prevent 10 diseases versus treating one, I'm 10 times farther ahead in the world than I was without. And so for that reason, I have made up my mind, I will do everything in my power to educate people on every country of this world, if possible, how not to end up in a situation like this poor man where you have no choices. You have no options. You have no future. God's plan is pretty simple. Remember the little girl with all the formulas on the wall? God's plan isn't that complex for our lives. We've got fresh air, pure water, nutritious food, exercise to move it all over within our body so that all those cells get fed, rest so that our immune systems can stay strong. How many of you feel like you get enough sleep every night? I see a hand or two. Come on, don't be shy. I want to see how many people. How many hours of sleep are you getting? Anybody getting 7? Okay. 8? Okay. 6? How about anybody getting 6? 5? Okay. Sleep studies are beginning to show that many people who live in what I call the fast lane are routinely surviving on 6 hours of sleep per night for decades. Can you function that way? It's kind of hard, isn't it? And when you see that, you begin to see people more sick than the people who will get the sleep that they need. Our immune systems are so highly dependent upon sleep and nutrition and hydration and transportation, moving it all around. But friends, there's one more element here, and that is that so many people so many times overlook, and that is trust in divine power. I saw a study yesterday that showed up on the news. There's a prison in California, and there's a Bible-believing Christian. I saw his name, and I happened to realize that's somebody I know. I've met that guy before. He's a big developer, big businessman, and he is a Christian, pretty committed to what he's doing. And he told the state of California, look, you give me that prison over there, I'll run it for you, but you have to let me run it my way. And they said, well, what will that be? Because this guy he knows how to be efficient and effective and save money. He said, contract with me to run the prison. I'll do it for this much money, and I'll save you a whole bunch of money over what you're paying. They said, we don't know how you can run it for that kind of money. He said, I know I can do it. They said, well, lose your money if you want to. You can have it for a year. We'll see what happens. He said, okay, this is the way it's going to be. We're drawing a line down through here. There's this wing and there's that wing. This wing is going to stay just the way it is. People can do whatever they want. They can eat what they want, just the same way they always have. These people over here, they're going to get a vegan, vegetarian diet. They're going to exercise, and we're going to offer Bible studies. Not compulsory. They can have it or take it or leave it. But if they're going to be over here, at least it's available to them. Over there, they don't have to. They can watch TV or whatever they're going to do over there. Prison officials told him these people would burn the place down before they would come on this side of the place. But go ahead if you want to. Before the study was done, he had more than 85% of the prison population on this side. You've watched what happens in prisons. What happens in prisons? All these guys are fighting over little pieces of dirt. This is for the African Americans. This is for the Hispanics. This is for the white people. And don't you get on our side, and we're not going to get along with you, and you're not going to get along with us. And we're from this gang, and you're from that gang, and we're all going to fight, and that's our territory. And they're killing each other and whatever else. And that's the way it stayed. These guys over here, it wasn't very long. They were all playing games together. Nobody had any turf. It was all everybody's, and they were all getting along and having a good time. Why? Because they were doing things God's way. God's way is always the best way, and it's an amazing experiment. People are looking at it and saying, I don't know. I posted it on a vegan vegetarian forum, and some people came back and said, yeah, it's interesting, but just too bad they had to have that God stuff shoved down their throat. One guy says, it doesn't prove a thing. The only way it would have proved anything is they didn't have to have compulsory religion. And I just commented back, it wasn't compulsory, it was their free choice. They chose it, and look at the effect. He said, it didn't prove anything. We seem so skeptical of God's provisions and God's plan, but God knew what was best from the very beginning. In John chapter 10, verse 10, Jesus said, I have come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. And I believe he was talking spiritually and physically.